Some truths don't break you all at once, they crack quietly, splitting your life open long before you realize the damage. That's what grief did to me. It didn't just take the people I loved, it hollowed everything I thought I knew. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the day my mother looked me in the eyes during her will reading and said, "You're nothing like your father. Worthless, just like him." And I believed her, until a battered briefcase proved she'd spent her whole life hiding the truth to protect her pride, and my father's greatest secret. If this part pulls you in, like the video, share it, and get ready, because the deeper we go, the darker it gets. My name is Caleb Rowan, I'm 42, and I own a modest furniture restoration shop in Brooklyn, just above the small workshop my father used to bring me into when I was a boy. The place always smells like varnish and cedar, a familiar scent that reminds me of the only man who ever taught me anything useful, my father, Everett Rowan. A quiet genius. A man my mother spent 20 years calling a failure. My mother was Vivian Rowan, the woman who built a real estate empire across the East Coast. She died with $41 million in assets and a reputation as sharp-edged as the heels she wore. My twin sisters, Camila and Sloane, inherited everything, every property, every account, every diamond bracelet. Me? I inherited what she considered the perfect final insult, a dusty old briefcase my father kept in a hallway closet for decades. Camila nearly snorted when the lawyer handed it to me. Sloane took a picture of me holding it, posting it on her private social feed with the caption, "When Mom's pettiness hits from the grave." Their husbands exchanged glances full of pity and thinly veiled amusement. Everyone knew Mom had always considered me the waste of talent, the son who chose wood over wealth. The briefcase itself was worn leather, cracked at the edges, the buckles barely holding together. Inside were a few old drafting tools, yellowed sketches of furniture designs, and a single business card for a bank in Manhattan. I almost threw it away. I almost let my mother's final opinion of me land exactly where she intended, right in the trash. But something stopped me. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was the way my father's handwriting on the sketches tugged at something inside me I hadn't felt in years. Whatever it was, I dialed the number on that business card. When the voice on the other end said, "Mr. Rowan, we've been waiting 20 years for your call. Your father's trust has unlocked," my blood ran cold. The man continued, "Please come immediately. And bring the briefcase." That's when everything I thought I knew began to fracture. Before the world shifted under my feet, my life was small but steady. My shop on Flushing Avenue wasn't much to look at, narrow windows, paint peeling on the door, but customers from all over Brooklyn trusted me with their antiques. I lived in the loft above it, a cozy but cramped space with mismatched furniture and the same coffee maker I'd used since college. My father taught me everything I knew, how to sand along the grain, how to read knots like a story, how to join pieces of wood so seamlessly you couldn't see where one ended and the other began. He died when I was 22, a quiet death in a Queens hospital bed while Mom attended a business deal. His last words to me were strange, "The truth has been waiting for you. You'll understand when you're ready." I thought grief made him poetic. I didn't understand he meant it literally. Mom never forgave my father for not becoming the mogul she wanted. In her version of the story, Everett had no ambition, no drive, no talent. She built her empire alone, her words, repeated at every holiday dinner like scripture. My sisters absorbed it, of course. They became carbon copies of her, relentless, polished, hungry for status. At the funeral, Uncle Raymond, my father's older brother, pulled me aside. He smelled like cheap whiskey and truth. "Your father wasn't who your mother said he was," he muttered. "One day you'll see. He wasn't a failure. He was just quiet. Too quiet." I shrugged it off at the time. Now I think he wanted to warn me. The will reading took place in a law office that looked like it was built specifically to intimidate people like me, marble floors, wall-length windows overlooking Midtown, furniture so modern it looked uncomfortable. The lawyer, Mr. Caro, read through pages of charitable donations before he reached the part about the estate. "To my daughters, Camila and Sloane Rowan, I leave my entire estate," he droned. "Including Rowan properties, all holdings, all investments, all personal jewelry." My sisters smiled like cats. Their husbands squeezed their hands in congratulation. Then, quietly, almost timidly, he continued. "To my son, Caleb Rowan, I leave Everett's briefcase from the hall closet. May he learn, finally, that choosing his father's path leads nowhere. You are worthless, just like he was." Silence. Even Sloane stopped smiling. The lawyer placed the briefcase in front of me like delivering a coffin. I carried that damn thing home on the subway. My entire inheritance, wrapped in dried leather and humiliation. And yet, something kept whispering in my mind. Dad's last words, "You'll understand when you're ready." It took me 3 full days before I opened the briefcase. 3 days of walking past it in my workshop, pretending it didn't feel heavier every time I looked at it. When I finally did open it, I wasn't expecting anything life-changing. Definitely not a decades-old business card with a number that still worked. But when the man on the phone said, "Your father left instructions. Bring the briefcase." Today, my world tilted. I locked up my shop, put on the suit I only wore to weddings and funerals, and headed into Manhattan with my father's battered briefcase at my side. The truth that had been waiting for me was about to open its door. I arrived at the towering stone building on Madison Avenue just before noon, the battered briefcase weighing against my palm like a judgment. Everything about Holloway Trust looked old in a deliberate way: polished brass doors, carved stone columns, a lobby hushed enough to feel sacred. The kind of place where money wasn't just stored, it was curated. A doorman in a forest green uniform nodded at me before I even spoke. "Mr. Rowan?" My heart stuttered. "Yes. They're expecting you. 7th floor." The elevator was operated by an actual attendant, a man who looked like he'd been part of the building since the Roosevelt administration. He didn't ask what floor. I realized he already knew. That should have been the first sign something about this place wasn't normal. When the elevator doors opened, a hallway of polished cherry wood and quiet luxury stretched out before me. At the end stood a frosted glass door etched with, "Private Banking, Holloway Trust." Inside, an older man rose from behind a mahogany desk. Silver hair, immaculate suit, posture like a retired general. "Mr. Rowan," he said, offering a firm hand. "I'm Charles Aldrich, president of Holloway Trust. Please, come in." His office wasn't just an office, it was a library, museum, and command center disguised as a workplace. Thick carpets, oil paintings, floor-to-ceiling shelves of leather-bound ledgers. And in the center, a long table covered in documents, seals, and 3 notaries waiting beside them. "Your father was a very precise man," Aldrich said. "He left instructions that all verifications be done in your presence. We'll begin with DNA and fingerprints." "For a bank account?" I asked, half laughing because the alternative was panicking. He didn't smile. "Not a bank account. A trust, not just in name, but in complexity. Your father had reasons. After today, you'll understand." The next hour felt like entering a spy agency rather than a bank. A nurse arrived to draw blood. A tech scanned my fingerprints repeatedly, 4 different machines, 2 backups. 3 forms of ID were copied, certified, and notarized by the silent trio at the table. Aldrich checked every document personally, his eyes flicking back and forth between my face and the paperwork as if searching for Everett in my expression. Finally, one of the notaries nodded. "Verification complete." Aldrich exhaled softly, like a burden had been lifted. "Now," he said, "Mr. Rowan, please bring the briefcase." I set it on the table. Aldrich opened a hidden drawer and retrieved a thin leather portfolio. Then he said the words that split my world open. "Your father wasn't merely a furniture maker. He held 17 patents still used by the hospitality industry today." I blinked. "What?" "Every Hilton in the world uses his modular bed frame design. Most corporate offices use his collapsible conference tables. The California hotel shelving that must meet earthquake standards? His system." He handed me a sheet listing the patent numbers and royalty accumulations. I stared. The number at the bottom was beyond comprehension. $347 million, I whispered. Aldrich nodded calmly. "Yes. That amount has accrued over 20 years. Interest compounded annually." My legs nearly gave out. I grabbed the edge of the table. My phone slipped from my hand, shattering on the marble floor, but I didn't move to pick it up. "Mr. Aldrich, my father died broke. My mother told everyone he left nothing." The older man's mouth tightened with something like sadness. "Your father chose silence. He believed your mother needed the narrative that she alone built her empire. He let her believe it because he loved her profoundly." My throat locked. The world tipped sideways. "But that's only half of it," Aldrich continued, reaching into the portfolio again. "Your father was also the co-founder of Rowan Holdings. He owned 40%. My mother's company?" I choked out. "No," Aldrich corrected gently. "Your parents' company. The early acquisitions, property analyses, renovation designs, they were your father's work. She was the strategist, yes. But he laid the groundwork. Every major purchase in the first decade came from his evaluations. He opened multiple boxes and spread out decades-old contracts across the table, blueprints with Everett's handwriting, typed reports from his vintage typewriter, letters with both my parents' signatures, even photos of my father at construction sites with early investors. Every document confirmed the same truth: Everett Rowan had not been a failure. He had been the backbone of the empire my mother took sole credit for. He never sold his shares, Aldrich added. He transferred them into this trust when he learned of his illness. How much are the shares worth? My voice cracked. Aldrich slid a valuation across the table. Approximately 200 million, based on the current market. My lungs forgot how to work. The number was obscene. Unreal. But then Aldrich placed a manila envelope in front of me, yellowed with time, handwritten with my name in my father's neat script. Your father left letters. One for each year he knew he'd miss. This is the first. My hand shook as I opened it. Caleb, your mother needed to stand alone to fight a world that doubted her. She grew strong because she believed she did it herself. I gave her that belief, even when it cost me my reputation. This trust is the truth she never allowed herself to tell. Inside the briefcase is a hidden compartment. Press both brass corners at once. The workshop wasn't sold. It's waiting. Build something beautiful. Love always. Dad. My eyes blurred. I wiped them quickly, embarrassed. Aldrich stepped back as if giving me space to absorb an earthquake. Your father didn't want you living in anyone's shadow, not your mother's pride or your sister's expectations. I found the hidden latch on the briefcase and clicked it open. Inside lay a set of keys to a building I hadn't been inside since I was a teenager, and another envelope. This one had my mother's harsh handwriting. Dated the day before she died. Aldrich looked surprised. She insisted on leaving it here. Said it was for your eyes only. My chest tightened as I read. I know what you'll find. I know what your father built. I hated him for letting me believe his sacrifice was incompetence. That hatred kept me alive in ways pride sometimes must. The briefcase isn't an insult, Caleb. It's the only apology I could manage. Don't forgive me. Just do better than we did. Mom. I sat there, stunned, the two letters trembling in my hands. For 20 years I believed my father was the failure my mother said he was. In one afternoon, the truth shattered that lie beyond repair. And the next step in unraveling everything was waiting in the form of a workshop I hadn't seen in 2 decades. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I sat in my workshop with the letters spread out on my desk, reading and rereading every word until the ink began to blur. My father's handwriting, so steady, so exact, felt like he was speaking to me across 20 years. My mother's letter, brittle and sharp-edged, felt like a confession she'd never been capable of saying aloud. Around dawn, I opened the briefcase again and touched the cold metal of the keys he'd hidden for 2 decades. Keys to a place I thought my mother had sold long before she erased my father from her version of history. The workshop. The place Dad spent most of his days building prototypes that Mom dismissed as little projects. The space he'd left behind when he got sick, the space Mom said she sold to cover his debts. The lie sat bitter in my throat now, knowing she'd simply erased him because acknowledging his contribution would have punctured the myth she built around herself. At 9 a.m., I grabbed the briefcase, my father's letters, and the keys, then headed for Long Island City, where the workshop had once stood in an industrial stretch along the river. Factories and old warehouses lined the narrow streets, half abandoned, half repurposed into expensive studios by people who had never known what sweat smelled like. The address looked dead when I arrived. The windows were covered, the metal door rusted at the edges, the faded sign ER Custom Furnishings barely visible. It looked abandoned. Forgotten. Like my father had been. But the moment I slipped the key into the lock, the tumblers clicked smoothly, effortlessly, as if someone had been maintaining it all these years. My breath caught. Inside, it was dark, silent. I flipped the light switch by instinct. And the entire workshop roared to life. Rows of overhead lamps flickered on. The ventilation system hummed. The smell hit me instantly, varnish, sawdust, lemon oil. The same smell that had clung to my father's clothes every time he came home from work. The space was massive. 10,000 square feet of machinery, towering shelves of lumber, hand tools carefully wrapped in cloth. Dust covered everything, but beneath that thin layer was perfection. Every station organized. Every blade sharpened. Every surface wiped clean. This wasn't abandoned. It had been preserved. On the main workbench was a note, yellowed with time, in Mr. Aldrich's elegant handwriting. Per your father's instructions, the workshop has been cleaned, serviced, and maintained monthly. No machines have been used. Nothing has been altered. This space belongs to you. I sank onto a work stool, emotion tightening my chest. My father had saved this place, not just for himself, but for me. Mom had lied not because she hated the space, but because she couldn't bear the reminder that she hadn't built her empire alone. And because she couldn't stand the thought that I had chosen his world over hers. I sat there for almost an hour before I texted my sisters. Me. The briefcase wasn't empty. There's something you both need to see. Dad left a workshop. Meet me here tomorrow at 2 p.m. Bring your husbands. Sloan replied first. Workshop? Mom said she sold that decades ago. Camila responded next. Caleb, what is this really about? If Mom left you her charity projects, just say it. But I didn't explain. I wanted them to see it with their own eyes. The next afternoon, just before 2 p.m., 2 black Mercedes SUVs rolled up. My sisters emerged in designer coats, high heels clicking sharply on the cracked pavement. Their husbands followed, checking watches like they were late for something more important. Sloane, ever the impatient one, called out, "Caleb, what is this place?" Mom said Dad died penniless. "Why are we here?" "Come inside," I said simply. They stepped into the workshop, and the transformation began instantly. Camila froze first, eyes widening. No way. Sloane took several steps forward, touching a sheet-covered machine as if afraid it would disappear. "This place is enormous." "Caleb, what is all this?" I pulled the tarps away one by one. Patents mounted on the walls. Architectural blueprints with Everett's meticulous handwriting. Framed photos, my father standing beside industry giants, engineers, even political figures. One showed him shaking hands with a president. Another, measuring a doorway while Prince Philip watched with his arms crossed. My sisters went silent. My brothers-in-law stopped trying to look bored. "This can't be real," Camila whispered. "Mom said he failed. She said he couldn't keep a job." "He didn't fail," I replied, voice steady. "He was the foundation of Mom's company. He designed the furniture still used in hotels all over the world. He owned 40% of Rowan Holdings." Sloane turned pale. Truly pale. "Are you telling us Dad was rich?" "No," I said softly. "I'm telling you he was brilliant. And he chose Mom's success over his own recognition." I led them to a corner of the workshop where 3 objects sat draped in white sheets. I pulled the coverings away. 3 handcrafted child-sized chairs, each made of cherry wood. Each engraved with the name and birth date of one of us. Camila gasped, covering her mouth. Sloane's eyes filled instantly. Their husbands stepped back, uncomfortable with emotion they didn't know how to handle. "Dad made these when you were born," I said quietly. "Mom told him they didn't match the house decor. She made him throw them out." "But he didn't," Camila whispered, touching the smooth armrest with reverence. "He kept them." Sloane ran her hand across her own nameplate, tears rolling freely now. "Why didn't she tell us? Why did she lie?" "Because acknowledging his role would have meant admitting she didn't build everything alone," I said. "And because she hated that I chose to follow his path." Camila sat on one of the stools, shoulders shaking. "We treated him like he was less than her. We laughed at you for wanting to be like him. God, Caleb, we were awful." I didn't disagree. But I did place my father's letters between them, along with my mother's final confession. They read silently, their faces collapsing with each paragraph. Then Camila said the words I never thought I'd hear from her. "Caleb, we're sorry." For once, Sloane didn't have a comeback. She just nodded, tears dripping onto the floor. We spent hours in that workshop. They asked questions about the trust, about the patents, about our father's silent legacy. I told them everything, about the $347 million in royalties, the 40% company shares, the years of untouched dividends ticking upward in the trust. To their credit, they didn't ask how much of it would become theirs. Their husbands did. But Camila shut hers down with a glare sharp enough to slice marble. "This isn't about money," she snapped. "This is about Dad." For the first time in decades, I saw the sisters I grew up with, not the polished Manhattan socialites Mom had molded, but the girls who used to sit with me on the workshop floor while Dad carved wooden toys. Something shifted in all of us that day. We left the workshop at sunset, the city skyline glowing behind it. The world felt different, like I'd stepped into a truth I should have known years ago. The next chapter of our lives wasn't going to be about what Mom left us. It was going to be about what Dad had built in secret. And what we would build next. The next few weeks were a blur of unraveling truths, rebuilding relationships, and learning the shape of a legacy my father had hidden not out of shame, but out of love. My sisters returned to the workshop almost every day after that first visit. They walked through the space the way you walk through a childhood home discovered after decades, touching everything, asking questions, sitting on the stools Dad built for us like they were trying to reconstruct forgotten versions of themselves. Camila once stood in front of a wall of patents for nearly 20 minutes, wiping tears without even noticing. "We lived in the same house as a genius," she whispered, "and Mom taught us to roll our eyes at him." Sloane spent hours going through the blueprints, tracing Dad's careful lines with her fingertips. "He didn't just design furniture," she murmured. "He designed entire systems. Look at this shelving design is still used in California hotels. I stayed in one 2 years ago." For the first time in our lives, they weren't dismissing me for choosing Dad's trade. They weren't mocking the sawdust on my clothes or the scratches on my hands. They were asking me to teach them. And it was strange, beautiful, even, to feel like the brother they finally saw instead of the disappointment they'd been trained to believe I was. 6 months passed quickly. The workshop transformed into something alive again. We cleaned every inch, reorganized the machinery, cataloged Dad's designs, even restored some of his unfinished pieces. Somewhere along the way, what began as grief turned into purpose. We filed paperwork to convert the workshop into a non-profit, the Everett Rowan Foundation for Craftsmanship and Design. My sisters insisted on using their portions of Mom's inheritance to fund the build-out. Their husbands argued, but they shut that down with a united front I'd never witnessed between them. "This isn't about investment returns," Camila said. "This is about Dad." For the first time in decades, I believed them. The trust Aldrich managed remained untouched, exactly as Dad intended. I used it to maintain the workshop, keep the machines running, and pay a small staff. But mostly, it stayed as Dad designed it, a sleeping giant, quiet and powerful. The foundation gained traction faster than any of us expected. Local high schools began sending students interested in woodworking. Retired craftsmen volunteered their time. A few veterans groups reached out, asking to use the workspace for therapy-based training. Word spread. By the 3rd month, we had a waiting list. My sisters came every weekend. Camila learned carving. Sloane learned to use the lathe. The transformation in them was slow at first, then startlingly rapid. Their husbands stopped coming. The workshop wasn't a world built for people who treated everything like a networking event or profit margin. That's when I realized my sisters weren't coming for me. They were coming for themselves, for the father they finally understood. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the warehouse windows, Sloane lifted her goggles, streaks of sawdust on her blazer, something unimaginable 6 months earlier, and said, "I wish Mom could have seen this." I didn't lie. She wasn't ready. Camila nodded thoughtfully. But she tried in her own way. That letter, she knew the truth mattered. She just couldn't say it while she was alive. "She gave us the briefcase," I said softly. That was her way of letting Dad's truth reach us. That night, after my sisters left, I stayed in the workshop alone. The lights cast long shadows over the machines. Dust motes drifted in golden beams. Everything felt familiar again, safe, grounded, full of memories. I pulled out my father's annual letters, 20 envelopes, each one dated for the year after his death, a message for birthdays, milestones, advice for the man he hoped I would become. I read each one slowly, absorbing every word as if he were still here, guiding me. One letter in particular stopped me cold. "Caleb, you won't understand this until much later, but your mother loved fiercely, even when she didn't know how to show it. Her pride was armor. She feared that without it, she'd disappear. Don't hold her weakness against her. And don't hold mine against yourself. You were never a disappointment. You were my legacy. Dad." I closed the letter and let out a breath I'd been holding for 20 years. Later that month, we held our first community open house for the foundation. More than 100 people came, students, teachers, retirees, parents with kids who'd never touched a tool in their lives. My sisters ran the front table, beaming like they'd been doing this their whole lives. People kept stopping to admire the chairs Dad made for us. I heard strangers whisper, "Whoever built those had real talent. These joints are perfect, master level." Imagine if he'd taught this craft publicly. I didn't correct them. Dad didn't need public recognition. He'd left his truth for the ones who mattered. When the event ended, I walked to the office in the back of the workshop. On the mantel sat 2 urns, my parents' ashes, side by side, exactly where they belonged. Their photographs stood next to them, Mom with her bold smile and unwavering posture, Dad with soft eyes and a quiet grin. They looked right together. Complicated. Imperfect. True. "We made it, Dad," I whispered. "I finally understand." And I did. Their love story wasn't clean or beautiful or cinematic. It was flawed and human. My father loved Mom enough to disappear behind her ambition. My mother loved him enough to leave the truth where it could finally be found, even if she couldn't face it while she lived. And I inherited not what they left, but what they meant. Now, every morning at the foundation, I unlock the workshop, breathe in the smell of sawdust, and run my hands over the tools Dad once held. My sisters arrive with coffees, roll up their sleeves, and dive into their stations. Students filter in, eager to learn. The sounds of sanding, sawing, and laughter fill the air. Everything feels whole again. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money. It's the truth someone protected for you, truth they hoped you'd be strong enough to carry when you finally learned it. And now? Now I carry it with pride. I close the foundation every night by touching the briefcase inside its glass display, a reminder that a cracked piece of leather was my key to discovering the man my father truly was, and the man he always believed I could be. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the quiet sacrifices people make out of love, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs hope today. Drop a comment below telling us about a time someone's hidden strength changed your life. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, emotional stories that remind us what truly matters. Thank you for listening.